It wasn't until my dog started vomiting black sludge that I realized something was seriously wrong with my rainwater tank. At first, I figured it was just a clogged filter or maybe a random algae bloom from the heatwave the week before. But when I unscrewed the inspection cap, the stench of burned motor oil hit me so hard I nearly keeled over. My carefully designed, eco-friendly rainwater system was now a swamp of thick, toxic muck. Before I could even wrap my head around it, I checked my security footage. There she was, Lisa, plain as day, sneaking into my yard with 2 5-gallon jugs, looking like she was on some twisted fitness kick. She pried open the lid of my main collection barrel, glanced around, and dumped every last drop inside. Then, just before strolling off like she hadn't poisoned my entire water supply, she stared straight into my camera, flipped it off, and smirked. That's when I knew she wasn't just petty, she was dangerous. And I wasn't about to let it slide. My name's Ryan, and I live in a modest, self-sufficient house on the edge of a decent neighborhood cursed with one of the most overbearing homeowners associations around. I built this rainwater setup myself: underground tanks, solar-powered UV filtration, custom pipes that channel extra runoff to my native plant garden. It's my pride and joy. My dogs drink from it, my veggies thrive on it, and during last year's drought, even some neighbors swung by with jugs to borrow from it. Everyone knew it worked, everyone except Lisa. As HOA president, Lisa's had it in for me from day one. To be fair, she's got it in for anyone who doesn't match her VY shine of beige fences, manicured hedges, and zero personality. She once fined a guy for wind chimes because they upset her poodle's emotional harmony. Another time, she ordered a vet to take down his American flag on Memorial Day because it clashed with her approved color scheme. My sin? Rain barrels and solar panels. I dared to live sustainably in her empire of sameness, and now I was clearly going to pay. I stood there, dumbfounded, watching that smirk loop on my screen. This wasn't just vandalism or a prank, it was deliberate sabotage, poisoning my water with toxic waste. That's not HOA nonsense. That's a crime. But instead of losing it, I grinned. Lisa had no idea who she was messing with. I'm not just some guy with a green thumb. I am a certified environmental systems engineer with a decade of state disaster relief experience and 5 years working with the EPA on water safety. I design systems like this for alleviating, and I document everything. After siphoning off the top layer of sludge and collecting samples in lab-grade containers, I sealed them, labeled them, and stashed them in my cooler. I knew what to test for: hydrocarbons, metals, synthetic additives that could ID the oil's brand. But first, I had to figure out if this was a one-off or if Lisa was on some deranged oil dumping spree. I started asking around, keeping it low-key. Turns out I wasn't the only one hit. My neighbor Sophia said her koi pond turned into a black mess overnight. 2 houses down, Mr. Henry reported his pressure washer spitting brown gunk from a tank he refilled weekly. Something told me Lisa wasn't just targeting mesh, was waging war on anything that didn't come from a city tap. At the next HOA meeting, there she was in her pastel cardigan, acting like nothing happened, handing out flyers about approved decor and shooting me a smug glare. I stayed quiet, biding my time, gathering more intel. Where'd she get the oil? Was she solo? And most importantly, had her sludge reached the protected runoff stream 2 miles south, tied to a state wetland? If it had, this wasn't just vandalism, it was a federal violation. Suddenly, HOA Lisa was looking a lot like EPA target number 1. The next day, I added 2 more hidden cameras and upgraded my motion sensors. I dug up my old permits, reviewed tank logs, and calculated the exact volume Lisa had tainted. I traced the overflow pipes, sampled the drainage ditch near her place, and spotted black streaks along the curb where it had seeped downhill. Every piece of EVY denke tightened the noose. Then, at the local AutoZone, I casually asked about their used oil disposal while grabbing filters. The clerk said a woman matching Lisa's description had bought 2 5-gallon jugs of synthetic motor oil 3 days earlier, paying cash. He laughed, saying she looked clueless about engines. They had cameras. I got a timestamp. By week's end, I had samples, photos, timestamps, witness accounts, and video proof, a dossier thick enough for a courtroom. Lisa thought she'd get away with it, but she didn't know I'd spent years with the EPA. When I called my old boss, WID, and said, "Remember when you told me to call if I caught someone dumping oil into runoff?" He just said, "Yeah." I replied, "Got a case for you. Bring a camera." WID didn't even let me finish before saying, "We'll be there Friday." That gave me 3 days to lock it down. I wanted felony charges that'd stick like tar. Lisa, Obley VYS, strutted around with her fake smile, handing out notices about aesthetic integrity, while I ran lab tests. The results? Sky-high hydrocarbons, zinc, phosphates, and a synthetic marker tied to 2 oil brands matching the AutoZone purchase. Timelines aligned perfectly. She bought it, waited a day, then dumped it. Case closed? Not quite. Sophia's pond and Henry's tank suggested a pattern. I walked the neighborhood with a clipboard, posing as a water quality researcher. For more homes reported oily water and dead plants. Samples matched my tank's contaminants. Mapping it out, they all linked to Lisa's property or an HOA shed. Was she stockpiling oil? I repositioned a camera toward her house. Thursday, she loaded her trunk with heavy jugs and drove to a sketchy storage facility. I tailed her discreetly. She accessed a unit, stayed 20 minutes, and left empty-handed. She had a stash. Friday, the EPA rolled in plain vans, utility coveralls. WID grinned like a kid at Christmas. I handed over everything: maps, footage, samples. They tested my tanks, soil, drains, and the stream. Contamination levels were off the charts. WID muttered, "She's screwed." Meanwhile, Lisa was setting up for an HOA tour, clueless, until the EPA hit her office with a warrant. She tried her sweet talk routine. "Oh, gentlemen, I didn't know we had an inspection," but WID flashed his badge. Environmental Protection Agency, ma'am. Her face cracked. They found oil drums in the HOA sheds, some labeled Drain Va Save, Lisa M, in faded marker. She screamed it was a setup, but no one bought it. Neighbors whispered as the EPA bagged EVY. She got a notice of felony charges pending lab results and stormed off, muttering about conspiracies. I felt lighter than I had in months, not from spite, but from justice kicking in. And it was about to get better. I wasn't done digging. Lisa's moves felt too practiced. I rented a storage unit across from hers, rigged a camera, and caught her Sunday morning hoodie, sunglasses, shuffling jugs, checking a clipboard like a pro. This wasn't random, it was organized. WID's eyebrow shot up when I showed him. If she's MOVing oil across properties, this could be trafficking. I checked HOA record repeated payments to Clear Sky Waste Solutions for oil disposal, odd for a residential area. I called them. A gruff voice said they don't serve UIC neighborhoods, then hung up when I mentioned Lisa. The EPA later tied Clear Sky to shady waste handling. Lisa's facade crumbled. She claimed medical leave from the HOA, but her lackey, Tara, called the investigation a witch hunt at a meeting. I handed the board an EPA report. Silence followed. Then her ex-husband, Greg, came forward. He said she'd trashed his garden with oil during their divorce, bragged about it, and had a vendetta against eco-freaks. His old notes matched her clipboard. Her house search revealed bins, gloves, and labeled oil boxes in operation. She fled but was nabbed 2 counties over. Charges piled up: felony dumping, fund misuse, conspiracy, waterway endangerment. Trial was set. Court was packed. Lisa's lawyer claimed she was framed by extremists, then blamed runoff. The jury didn't flinch as her oil-dumping video played twice. Greg's testimony, her barrels to eliminate list with my name, sealed it. I explained the science: contamination spread, wetland risks, oil matches. Guilty on all counts. She got probation, restitution, community service, cleaning roadside waste, and a permanent HOA ban. The neighborhood exhaled. I rebuilt my system tamper-proof, smarter with neighbors pitching in. They pushed me to run for HOA president. I did, on transparency terms and won big. We axed Lisa's rules, encouraged green levying. My final touch? A sign by my tanks. This system serve UI ved ignorance and malice, now a monument to resilience and clean water. Thanks, Lisa M., for the inspiration. Neighbors loved it. Lisa's legacy? Orange vests and trash duty. Mine? A thriving, free community. Justice, one raindrop at a time.